Okay, we'll just give it another minute to let people call in. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Reni Otake, and I'm the Hawaii HFMA Sponsorship Chair. On behalf of the Hawaii chapter, I would like to thank you for joining us in today's Platinum and Gold chapter sponsor webinar series. We're proud to present Infinx, our Platinum level chapter sponsor, with their webinar titled Mastering Denials Management, the AI Edge in Revenue Integrity. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. We've placed everyone on mute for this webinar. However, you'll see a few control buttons at the bottom of your screen that we encourage you to use throughout the session. Feel free to use the chat button to provide any feedback or comments and the Q&A button for any questions. We will be monitoring the chat box, and Stuart and Ramona will answer any questions at the end of the session. After the presentation, the PowerPoint will be available to you on our HFMA chapter website. I'm now going to hand it over to our speakers for today, Stuart Newsome and Ramona Hernandez.
Yeah, thank you so much, Renee. I really appreciate that introduction. Just want to and thank everyone else for letting us attend today and for you taking the time to listen to us. Obviously, we're going to speak about mastering denials management and AI edge in revenue integrity. I'm Stuart Newsome. I'm actually the VP of RCM Insights here in Infinix. Basically, subject matter expert of all things RCM. I serve as a solutions engineer as well, but also host our podcast and webinars. So if you can go to our website, you can check out that content information. A lot of great content, all things revenue cycle. And I'm joined by Ramona Hernandez. She's our VP of Revenue Cycle Growth and Strategy. So Ramona, I'll let you say a few words about yourself as well. So you probably
Yeah,
don't need any introductions, right?
no. Aloha, everybody. I'm Ramona Hernandez with Infinx. I am the VP of Revenue Cycle and Growth. I'm happy to be here with Stuart. I feel privileged to co-host with him on this webinar. So we're looking forward to it. So let's have some fun.
All right, absolutely. Well, we'll dive right in. Ramona and I, got together to put together this content, and we felt, denials is just top of mind for everyone. And so when we put this together, we're just going to kind of ad lib some things, maybe talk through some things. We do have our structure in this PowerPoint, as everyone is just so used to PowerPoint these days. So we hope to make it through in time, or we may finish early. Who knows? But I'll just start off that if you're in revenue hospital cycle today, which most of you probably are, you don't need us to tell you that denials have intensified. So you feel it in your staffing models, in your payer conversations, especially for your monthly cash forecasts. And a few years ago, denial prevention felt like a program, right? Something we turned to quarterly, maybe do a report, some analytics that kind of told us, how things look. But today it feels like it should be a strategic posture, and we need to look at it more strategically. So hopefully, as we go through this today, we'll be able to articulate that for you. If we get it wrong, then it constrains everything. So things like hiring, technology investments, even clinical projects. So our promise for this next, I don't know, 40, 45 minutes or so, we'll see how far this goes. It's going to be very simple. There's no buzzword bingo. We'll, so to speak, yeah, I know. We'll connect with you on what you already are doing well with specific places in AI and AI agents and how they can add some leverage. So you can prevent more denials because that's the end game, preventing more denials. Also reduce all that rework because you have to work those denials again, and also protect from compliance because everyone's always on the revenue side and how you can actually reduce that work and get more revenue. But there's also a compliance angle as well without adding any new headcount to your line if you are having some staffing issues. So we'll begin with current hospital data to orient the problem. Then we'll clarify some generative AI versus agentic AI language. I know that's kind of all the buzz right now because the vocabulary matters when you're choosing the right tool. So from there, we'll focus on patient access and document capture because that's where upstream defects begin. So we'll share some anecdotal cases and end with a leader's roadmap that balances ambition and guardrails. So as we go, just listen to two themes I want you to get out of this. First is timing. So the cost of discovering problems after submission versus before, very critical. And then second is consistency, how to make the good day process the everyday process without burning out your team. So we'll dive right in by looking at what the trends are telling us, those lines are telling us, so to speak, about 2023, because we have some data from 2023, and then what it's going to look like for the next 12 to 18 months. So with that, I'll go to the next slide and turn it over to Ramona.
Hello there, everybody. So when you peel back the monthly close, payer talks, denial meetings, signal patterns explain a lot of the pain, but the slope is up. So across hospitals, final inpatient claim denials as a percentage of inpatient claim dollars, it rose from 1.7% in 2021 and then 2.5% in 2023. So as you can see, it rose. That is a 51% increase in 2 years. So if your service lines are large, every tenth of a percent represents seven figures. Well, well, in a lot of cases, well, we always say, well, we'll fix it after it denies, but that mindset becomes unattainable at that slope. So more importantly, denials for prior authorization, pre-cert, climb, and to inpatient prior authorization, pre-cert initial denials rose from 1.7% in 2021 and again over 2% in 2023, while outpatient prior authorization pre-cert denials rose almost 1% to over 1%. So these initial signals are crucial when inpatient prior authorization defects go up. So final denials almost certainly follow unless you rewire the whole shebang. So you rewire the upstream controls. So let's interpret this as an operator. So many of you are operators, so you'll understand this. So percent to dollars. If your inpatients are net revenue is say 1.2 billion and an additional 0.25% denials if it converts to write-offs or long cycle appeals equate to about 3 million of pressure. So that's not water under the bridge. That's a deferred clinical problem or 20 or let's say 20 vacant roles you can't backfill. That's quite a bit. So second, the speed mismatch, not match, the speed mismatch. Payers are using automated screens to catch missing authorizations. So they're using automation against you. So remember that. Mismatch eligibility, the doc capture defects, those checks fire in milliseconds. So a manual pre-flight check happens hours or delays later. or not at all when staffing is tight. So if the math is simple, just to make it simple, if their detection is real time and our prevention is, say, manual, we lose on volume, simply. So let's talk about the pipeline dynamic. Mm, Final denials are the end of the pipe. So in the front of the pipe, EBB and prior authorization say show more defects, the back will overflow. So that argues the shifting left. Add controls in patient access and document capture so you can correct errors before you use clinical resources. Every error fixes pre-claim is a denial that never happens. Think about that. And then latent carry costs. Even when you win an appeal, time is money. We always hear that, right? Time is money. For every 10 days you're waiting for a payer decision in days in AR accumulating, in 2023, adjudication overhead ballooned industry-wide. We've seen that. Even as overturn rates hover around 70%, the cost of getting those rose sharply. So the goal isn't just to win more appeals, it's the appeal less by submitting cleaner. So what does that mean for for your next 90 days? Well, audit most of the common initial denial categories, especially authorization related misses, documentation dependencies, and trace them back to the moment the account was scheduled or referred. If you trend mirrors from 2021 to 2023, you likely have a front door problem masquerading as a back office problem. Well, that's solvable, but not by asking exhausted teams, which we all have them, to work harder. It's really to solve by moving the work earlier and standardizing so it's done at the same way every single time. So with that, the slope established, we established a slope. So next question is, what exactly is triggering the denials? Let's look at the top categories. Let's go to slide 3. So top hospital drivers cost in 2023. So let's talk about that. Across the hospital CFO and RCM leaders survey in 2023 that says that the top denial drivers aren't exotic. Well, that should be good news, right? They're operational and fixable. So patient access, registration errors, miskeyed plans, info on subscriber mismatches, COB issues, terminated coverage, and a lot of these look familiar to you guys. But we see these all the time. Medical necessity documentation gaps, LS, LS, LCD, NCD alignments, DRG clinical validation, missing indications, missing incorrect patient information, commonplace clerical data errors with outsized denial impacts, physician documentation issues, lots of those, utilization management, friction, level of care status. So in parallel, macro costs surged. So 2023 estimated that it showed us adjudication work costing us 26 billion industry wide. That's up 23% year over year, with an average denial of 15% and per claim admin costs increasing from 40 from 2022, and again it rose in 2023. So overturns sit around 69, 70%, meaning we are often right eventually, but only after burning time and dollars. So how should leaders interpret that? How would you interpret that? So one is denials are a processing signal, right? So if missing an EVB data and doc gaps top your list, then the control points is before clinical resources are used. So it's not enough to be great at appeal letters, and I thought I was a great appeal letter. That was my jam back in the day. So the core the core capacity is front end completeness and correctness. So the other is, we can talk about the value is in prevention variance reduction. So we always talk about that, right? How do we prevent that from happening? Your best coordinators already do the right things. They check benefits properly, they chase the right documents, they attach the right page, they have crosswalk policies. The problem isn't the problem is consistency at scale. On a good day, the process is flawless. On a busy day, steps get skipped, they get missed. Denials don't care which day it is. So your target is reducing variances, not just raising averages. And a few more upstream fixes compound downstream. EVB accuracy reduces patient access and authorization failures. So good document capture ensures medical necessity supports in where the claim is when the claim is formed. So pre-claim scanning heads off obvious defects. So each upstream fixes lower downstream failure rates. Sounds easy. Sounds easy enough. But visibility is the multiplier. So denials data needs to be fed back into the intake and clinical operations. Let's say if orthopedic is driving a spike in insufficient imaging, denials in it for both a documentation coaching opportunity and let's say a doc capture routing issue. If a payer flips an edit, an ML patterning can surface in days instead of months. So you can adjust the authorization or coding guidance. So leaders learn in exercise. This is just a little exercise for you. So if you had to pick one category to just to drastically shrink in a 60 to 90 day, which would it be? Would it be EVB defects, patient authorization or patient access orchestration misses, or document capture gaps? So your answer guides your first agent pilot. So now that we're now oriented to where we need precision on and how, the start with vocabulary, can't even say it, of generative AI versus agentic AI. So next slide, please. This is something that I have been very fascinated on, is the difference between AI, and Stuart's going to go more into the difference between AI versus agentic AI. But let's honor what traditional teams do now. Denial analysts and appeal writers are experts. So they really are. They understand payer logic. They build airtight cases, and they reuse dollars that otherwise be lost. They would not be used. They resurface dollars that would otherwise be lost. But even elite teams are fighting structural headwinds. Reactivate timing. So by definition, you intervene after a denial. The encounter is over. Clinicians have moved on. Documentation clarifications require memory and time. Every day ticks by extends AR and weakens your position. So let's talk about labor intensity. Steps like collect notes, attach records, check portals, rekey a field, compose a letter are repetitive and fragile. So multiply this by thousands of claims, and it's no surprise per claim admin costs rose. And they're going to keep rising if we don't fix it. Payer velocity. Let's talk about that. The checks that reject a claim run at machine speed. Manual pre-checks, we can't compete. No longer quality gate waits. The more defects will slip. So they'll just keep slipping. Variance under pressure. Well, The best coordinators have a gold standard checklist. Reality has interpretations of interruptions. I'm sorry, interpretations. Interruptions. We all know that, right? PTO, 15-minute backlogs, you name it. Variances, they're not they're not incompetence of they're just the enemy. So yes, you still need strong appeal capability. We still need the appeal specialists. But the change of the slope, the work must move left into patient access and document capture, where errors are cheap to fix and completeness can be a standard. So you want to set that gold standard. And what does that look like? So that's where AI enters. But not as a magic wand. I wish we had a magic wand. We all wish we had magic wands, but we need to be specific about two families of AI and that they work together, but do different jobs completely. So Stuart's going to take us into the next slide, which is about what AI versus agentic AI.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, so as you were saying earlier, everyone's kind of talking about AI and it's all a buzz. It seems like everywhere you go, whether it's a conference or say
Mhm.
a website, everyone's labeling AI. So what exactly does that mean? Specifically, the difference between generative AI as well as agentic AI. So I'm going to try and be as articulate as someone from the South can be, because I know sometimes I have
That'd
a
be great.
training. It's very hard to understand. So I'm going to try and articulate that as best I can. But when we say AI, we're really talking about two distinct helpers that complement each other in the revenue cycle. I like to frame them as thinking partners versus doing partners. All right, so follow me with this for a second. So generative AI is the thinking partner. It reads, it interprets, it summarizes, and it drafts. You just think of your chat GPTs of the world, right? In the hospital RCM world, that means it can read payer bulletins or an LCD NCD policy and produce a clean, plain English summary to your team and can act on that your team can actually act on. So think about how powerful that is. So how many of you have actually taken a policy and put it into ChatGPT so it can tell you, explain this to me in plain language. What is this talking about? That step alone can mean a lot.
Yeah.
And I've actually done it myself, and it's pretty amazing. It can also draft an appeal letter with the correct tone and structure. It can convert a denial reason code into a step-by-step remediation instructions for a coordinator. It can also create a checklist of documentation requirements for a service line so staff stop hunting and start validating. So its superpower is language and explanation. All right, so it's very easy to understand that generative AI takes on prompts. It makes dense content usable, and it does it in seconds. But by itself, generative AI doesn't move a claim through the system. It doesn't click the button. It doesn't attach a PDF, so to speak, or it doesn't even open a portal if you're trying to get some authorization. So again, it waits on a prompt. Someone has to tell it what to do, give it instructions, upload something to it, and then it gives it, and it's amazing and it has its place. But here's where agentic AI comes in, and it's the doing partner. All right. So an agent, and if you heard the term agent, I'm hoping this will explain it further. But it uses rules and model reasoning to take multi-step actions toward a goal. So in RCM, that looks like verifying eligibility and benefits. It's grabbing the correct plan, reconciling what's in your system, and flagging those mismatches. It's initiating and monitoring prior auths. It's populating required fields. It's checking status. It's prompting for missing clinicals and escalating when SLAs aren't at risk. It's also gathering and attaching documentation. It's finding the op note or imaging report in your capture system, attaching it to the right encounter and labeling it correctly. It's also updating your source systems. It's posting results, noting status changes. It's making sure that the recordings and is exactly what it's supposed to be in an audit. So the agent superpower is workflow and execution. So you have one superpower where it's documentation. It's taking on and giving you explanations. And this one's actually attached to the workflow. It's taking action. So it reliably changes the state of the work. It verifies, attaches, submitted, approves. So imagine that, changing the state of the work. It's in a certain cycle. And part of that cycle, it moves it along in that cycle. So outcomes aren't left to chance or even to bandwidth. So here's why the distinction matters, for this organization. So outcomes versus what I like to call artifacts. So great language like letters, summaries, or checklists is very valuable, but it's still an artifact. Leaders need outcomes. So fewer denials, faster cash, tighter compliance. Agents create outcomes by actually doing the steps that must be done for a clean claim. And then there's timing. Generative AI typically runs on demand when you prompt it, like I said before, but agents run on events, say a new schedule, an inbound fax, payer status change. So corrections happen as soon as risk appears, not at the end of someone's queue. And then there's consistency at scale. Now, on a good day, and you heard Ramona talk about good days, right? We all have good days, and we all have days that we wish would never have happened. But on a good day, your team executes every step perfectly. On a bad day, steps get skipped. Agents make the good day process the everyday process. Ramona said that earlier, and it's really a great line. So there's no forgetting the attachment, there's no miskeying the subscriber, and there's no missed status check. And then there's auditability. So you want to make sure that you can track what these agents are doing. So agents log inputs, they log their actions and their outcomes, which makes compliance comfortable and turns what happened into a dashboard tile instead of forensic exercise where you're trying to dig and find out what happened. So the real power shows up when the two work together. So picture this sequence, if you will. Generative AI distills a payer policy into a crisp checklist. All right, so that's a superpower. The agent executes the checklist. It verifies benefits, initiates the prior auth. It fetches any attachments and documentation that may be needed, if needed. Sometimes they may not be needed. It'll make that decision. It's not needed. Then it logs every step, or reverse it. The agent assembles all the evidence for an appeal package. And generative AI drafts that letter that your specialist reviews and then sends. So there's interpretation plus execution plus all of this equals prevention. And it also equals speed. So as we continue through this PowerPoint, just keep this pairing in mind, so to speak, because I'm going to get a little bit more in the weeds a little bit, but I thought it was really good to level set exactly what we're talking about when we say generative AI as well as agentic AI. So when we say use AI, we don't mean ask for smarter text and hope for the best. What we really mean is apply generative AI where comprehension and communication bottlenecks that work, and also apply agentic AI where multi-step, time-sensitive actions must run without fail. So I'm going to move to the next slide. And this slide is all about the common engine that these two elements use. So you have generative AI, you have agentic AI. But believe it or not, they use the same brain, so to speak. Let's just call it a brain, right? So it's what is the same underlying model. They're called large language models. And that these models are designed to understand language. It's in the name. So a lot of people call them LLMs. So when you hear the phrase LLMs, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about these large language models. And they understand language. They interpret context and reason through messy inputs. They share the same brain power, but what changes is how that brain power is used. So the difference is this. So Gen AI has a single prompt and it produces the content. So you ask once, it creates once. Think, summarize this LCD, draft this appeal, explain this denial code in plain English. It's a one-to-one interaction that produces a content artifact. There's that word again, artifact. Then agentic AI is involved in a decision loop that then takes action. So the agent doesn't stop at a single output. It enters a loop, so to speak. It's thinking. So it's using that LLM model to perceive, then decide, then act, then check, and then act again. until the goal is actually reached. So instead of text, you get a state of changes in your system, such as eligibility reconciled, your prior auth initiated and is tracked. Maybe there's some docs that have been attached. There's a status update. A log of what's happened has been written. So just keep this analogy in mind. LLMs, which again is large language models, equals an engine. It's the common intelligence in both of these approaches. So Gen AI equals, say, a typewriter. It produces excellent content quickly. Agentic AI equals a self-driving car. And I know we've all seen these self-driving cars. I've seen them. I've never gotten into one yet, but we'll see. Maybe I'll be brave enough to get into one soon. But these self-driving cars, they navigate a route, they make decisions, and they take actions until it arrives at its destination. So let's put that in maybe hospital terms. So you have the same brain, different outcomes. So you ask a Gen AI system to help with medical necessity. It will read policy text, highlight required elements, and draft a checklist. So you ask an agentic system to help. So it will apply that checklist, find the supporting documentation, say in a doc capture type of application. It will attach it to the encounter and it will flag a missing element with a specific to do for a human if needed. So it's the same model, just different timing. Gen AI bots, or I should say, Gen AI actually produces this productivity when a specialist is engaged. An agentic AI boosts throughput even when no one is watching because it's triggered by workflow events, say a new schedule or maybe an inbound fax or a portal change. So it's the same intelligence with different accountability. So both can explain why, but only agents routinely log what they did, where, and when, and revenue integrity, that really matters. So it's not enough to be right. You have to be able to prove the process was followed. So then there's the same foundation with LLMs, but just different ROI paths. So generative AI shortens thinking time and writing time, whereas agents shorten cycle time and AR time. So by ensuring that the steps that avoid denials actually happen and happen consistently, and that's the key word. You want it to go to scale and you want it to be consistent. So a simple mental picture for your team is use the engine to understand and use the car to arrive. If a task ends in a document, say a letter, a summary, or a checklist, that's Gen AI. If a task ends in a change status or a submitted request or an attached file, something that moves the claim forward, then that's an agent lane, right? So there's two quick micro scenarios that I want to just emphasize my point here with and really cement this in is that, let's say, eligibility verification of benefits at scheduling is one. Gen AI turns the payer's eligibility rules into a short, actionable checklist for staff, whereas the agent actually runs the eligibility check, reconciles mismatches, and then posts a correction note automatically within the system. And then there's a prior authorization orchestration. And I love this scenario. So Gen AI explains what the payer requires and drafts a tidy list of fields and documents, whereas the agent will opens the request, it populates those fields, and it uploads the right document, monitors the status hourly, and pings a human when an exception appears. Now, that's the same brain power, different goal kind of concept. So now I just want to plot some RCM rails, so to speak, because everything needs guardrails, so to speak, and then place the highest leverage agent touch points. So we'll move to the next slide and talk about AI and revenue cycle, the basics. So visualize a single rail, so to speak. So there's patient access leads to claims, leads to denials, leads to AR, right? We've all kind of lived it probably, where there's a denial, no auth required, or there's a denial in the back end where an auth was required, where in the front end, you probably got no auth required message. We hear that when we talk to clients that that's a problem, and I know it's an issue. Why they do that, I don't know. And I've always thought that it's kind of an irony when that's the whole point of prior auth is to prevent the denial, that you will know that you need authorization to get this procedure scheduled and done. And then when you actually receive that notice, no auth required, lo and behold, it's denied. because authorization was required. I've just never understood that. But we'll place actually 5 AI touch points on this process and then tie each to a denial prevention payoff. So the first is going to be predictive denial risk scoring. Now imagine that, predictive denial risk scoring. These models flag which claims are likely to deny and why. So the diagnosis service mismatch, maybe a missing attachment, prior authorization is likely not required. Maybe there's some payer specific edits involved. So the value isn't the score, it's the route. So risky claims are sent to a pre-claim work list with a precise to-do, where you may, for instance, attach op note on page 2 for LCD XYZ, whatever the case may be. So you're looking for that result, which is going to be fewer obvious denials and lower first pass failure or first pass claim rate, or a higher first pass claim rate. So then you have the machine learning models, the pattern detections for denials. So when a payer changes an edit or a unit's documentation habit drifts, okay, machine learning models sees it and then it days in instead of months. So this is instantaneous. It's going to understand that. You don't even have to wait for the denial to happen in most cases. So leaders get a trend alert and they can push a micro policy change, such as like add a pre-claim check, update a template, maybe do a pre-service check. So you plug the leak while it's actually small before it gets really big and before the ship actually starts sinking. The third area is document capture agents. So hospitals drown in unstructured inputs. So agents that categorize, that extract, then route change to the game. This is going to be a big difference maker. So the right document lands in the right encounter with the right metadata. Denials coded are as missing documentation evaporate because missing gets rarer. Staff stop hunting and start validating. So this is one of the biggest changes that we see, that especially in a world where fax is still a thing. And even though it's an e-fax or maybe write fax or some kind of fax service, and it's quote unquote a PDF, that means paperless. Technically, it's paperless, but it's still not solving a problem. Someone's still touching that PDF and having to make all those determinations. And this is where an agent can actually make a big difference there. And then fourth, there's prior authorization automation. So agents initiate the prior auth. They can determine whether a prior auth is even needed. Imagine how much time is saved there. I've heard stories where it's just mandatory. We're just going to check prior auths for everything. Well, some procedures don't even need a prior auth. So it's going to look for that determination. It's going to actually monitor the status. It's going to request additional clinicals when needed. It's going to reconcile back to your system, and it's going to escalate on any SLA risk. So this directly targets that 21 to 23 rise that Ramona was talking about in prior auth driven initial denials for the inpatient. Remember, it was 1.73%, rose to 2.18%. And then for outpatient, it rose from just about 1% to a little over 1.8%. So even those small improvements, those numbers may seem small, but as Ramona pointed out, they can be 7 figures to some institutions. So next is your eligibility and verification benefits guardrails. And this is where agents can validate benefits at scheduling and then reconcile against your system of record. Subscriber mismatches, terminated coverages, maybe your COB issues. It's all caught before resources are used. And then the prior auth logic and EVP accuracy is fed into each other. So together they remove a huge share of preventable denials. Now, across all 5 of these, you add a leadership analytics ribbon called top 5 pre-claim fixes, or maybe it's called prior authorization turnaround by payer. Another title could be doc types most frequently missed. Maybe it's even called denial risk heat map by unit. You're no longer guessing where risk is. You're actually steering it because you have the analytics that matter right in front of you. So one more point, and then we'll move to the next slide, is this notion of called interlocks. So these touch points reinforce one another. So if you think about it, when you're locking things together, even if you're locking your hands together and you try and pull them apart, it's very difficult to do so. So these are the same way, this interlocking. So better document capture makes pre-claim scan easier. Stronger EVB reduces prior auth defects. Machine learning patterns tells you which checklist to enforce this month, not last quarter. So this is why patient access is your best first step. So it's the front door to multiply denial chains. Now let's make it tangible with specific agent plays that you can pilot even next quarter, as soon as next quarter. So if we move to the next slide, I just want you to think of these as 6 modular plays, if you will. And everyone understands probably football, basketball, everybody runs a play, so everyone huddles up, you call the play, and you're going to run that play. So think of it in that scenario. So you can start with one and improve the win. If that play works, then you can layer on the next play and the next play until you reach your goal, until you actually score and get those points that you work so hard to get. So first play would be pre-claim denial prevention. So the agent checks benefit alignment, authorization presence, it required attachments, and basic diagnosis service coherence. Now, is there anything missing? Then if it is, it fetches it from the document capture or routes a targeted task. Now, on pass, it stamps the claim submit ready with a log. And then it moves to the next play, which is the appeal support. I know that Ramona spoke a little bit about this earlier as well, but you have the agent assembles appeal artifacts, such as policy references, timelines, and counter details, attachment checklists. So Gen AI drafts the letter, and then a human reviews it and sends. So the outcome is consistent quality, lower cycle time, and then better standardization. Then you layer on the EVB guardrail, which is the next play, or the third play, if you will. So at scheduling, the agent validates eligibility and benefits, and it reconciles common mismatches. So if the plan in your system conflicts with the real plan, it flags, there's that referee again, it flags it and corrects before a dollar is even spent. So next you have plan 4. This is the fourth plan, is where the prior authorization orchestration. And I love that word orchestration because it's about playing beautiful music or organizing things together to work seamlessly. So the agent initiates the prior auth based on payer rules. It tracks the status, it posts reminders, it escalates when SLAs are at risk. Then the autopilot for routine requests, it coordinates that. Just think about that. It's an autopilot, if you will, with human review where ambiguity exists. And then the next play would be your document capture routing. So agent classifies inbound faxes and PDFs, different document types like orders, notes, medical records, imaging reports, whatever is coming in via your fax. And then it extracts all the data and puts them in fields, attaches it to the encounter, and then tags with a policy-ready label set. So the payoff is fewer. It's missing documentation, denials, and fewer man hours are spent hunting. And then the last play that you would likely want to implement after all those are successful is analytics for leadership. You just have to measure things. Everyone's familiar with this. Everyone's familiar with data points, but you want those data points that really matter. So the agent telemetry becomes leadership intelligence. So dashboards show pre-claim saves, prior auth bottlenecks, repeated doc gaps by service, maybe in a payer-specific issues. So this is where you can change behavior upstream, like brief a unit, update a form, or tweak a template. So how to pick your first play? I would just look at slide 3's categories because everyone's going to get a copy of this slide, but you can go back and look at slide 3 and look at all those categories that Ramona went over. And if your number one driver is missing inaccurate data, then begin with eligibility and benefits and dot capture. If it's prior auth misses, lead the pack, then begin with a prior auth orchestration. If obvious defects account for 30 to 40% of your denials, then your pre-claim denial prevention gives you the fastest visible win. So these guardrails are baked in. So each play runs under governance, logging exceptions for humans to look at. You have human approvals and thresholds. And then there's a policy library linking any rules to payer language, like your LCDs and your NCDs, so you can show why an action was taken. And that makes it audible and trainable for staff. So next, we're going to move to the next slide. I know we're approaching time really quick, but we're going to go as fast as we can. But we're going to bring this all alive with some true life stories of what changes when you pick two plays and run them very, very well. So just say that there's a multiple hospital system was experiencing a surge of medical necessity denials across a high volume service line. Appeals often succeeded, but staff were exhausted and days in AR crept up. So leadership chose two agent plays. So the first play they chose was pre-claim denial prevention focused on attachment completeness and diagnosis service coherence for that service line. So then they also chose document capture and routing to classify and extract key fields from inbound referral packets, ensuring that those correct docs were attached to the right encounter. So they set the right government in place and made those governments tight by setting in daily exception stand-ups, like maybe 15 minutes with revenue cycle, and also a nurse reviewer to make sure that to fine tune the edge cases. And then they also had weekly KPI reviews, like first pass denials or appeal cycle times or number of pre-claim saves. And then they had a simple approval threshold, like anything is greater than X amount of dollars or ambiguous routes to human review. Now, what changed in 90 days was the first pass denials dropped by 25% in the targeted cohort, so to speak. They also had an appeal cycle time shortened because fewer cases reached appeal. And then staff hours pivoted away from document hunting toward coaching providers and refining templates. So then leadership visibility increased. They had a dashboard show that the exact pre-claim saves and where exceptions were actually clustered. So what didn't change? Well, payer policies didn't get easier. Clinical documentation wasn't magically perfect. What changed was timing and consistency. The agent always checked. The agent never forgot to attach page 2. The agent never missed the LCD keyword. Humans stayed where they were irreplaceable, which were judgment calls, ambiguous cases, and relationship work with clinicians. So by month 4, the system added EVB guardrails that to the same service line, so to speak, and catching plan mismatches and COB surprises up front. So the effect compounded. So they have fewer avoidable denials, steadier cash, and calmer teams. So the story is ordinary in the best way. It picks the highest leverage upstream points, standardizes them with agents, and then keeps humans in the loop and let the metrics compound. With the upside established, how do we ensure safety and trust at your scale? So next, I'm going to turn it back over to Ramona to talk about governance and oversight. And I promise we're almost done.
We're almost done. So, automation without guardrails is a non-starter in healthcare. So, the advantage of the agentized work is that it can be more governable than an ad hoc manual steps. So, if you design for it, six principles. Let's talk about the 6 principles if you design for it. So, audit everything by default, every action, input seen, rule invoked, action taken, systems touched, outcome. So logs are human readable and sampled by compliance. So if a payer questions a submission, you can show the exact steps. If an error happens, you can diagnose and remedy it precisely. 2, humans set thresholds and approves exceptions. Decide early where your approvals are required by DOFR threshold, service sensitivity, or payer. Start conservative. So over time, as trust builds, reduce friction for low risk actions while keeping post ad hoc or post hoc sampling. So 3, write a scope of authority. So agents can verify benefits, initiate prior authorization, attach documents, update specific fields, and route work. They cannot alter clinical decisions or author original clinical content, but scope depends builds trust with clinicians and legal. 4, codify escalation paths. No deed ends. So define if X, then route to Y, Q. With clear SLAs and instructions, the agents should be able to leave a short note that saves humans time. So time is money. So need an op note, else, page 2, LCD 1234 requires a phrase Z maybe, attach and approve. So those things matter. So again, time is money. So 5, maintain a policy library. Link to payer rules, LCD, NCD references, and internal policies. When a rule changes, you update the library once. Agents reference a new version immediately. So this keeps content and actions synchronized. 6, partner early with IT and InfoSec. So use at least privilege access, secret vaulting, API scopes, the PHI minimization in logs. So treat agents as service accounts with oversight. This prevents shadow automation and earns organizational trust. So governance and cadence. Stand up a small agent oversight board. Revenue cycle compliance, IT, a clinical voice needed. Meet biweekly initially, then monthly. The board reviews logs, exceptions, and scope changes, and signs off on new plays. Practically, that makes adoption safer and faster. Again, you want to establish the trust. So with these rails in place, you can scale from one pilot to a program and to another. Here's a proven sequence. Next slide. So leaders succeed by sequencing wins. Here's a programmatic roadmap. So phase 1, pick one high leverage pilot, 60, 90 days. Choose where your data hurts most. Often that's doc capture, or EVB plus PA, which is prior authorization, to stop authorization-related initial denials. So define a tight cohort. And this service line payer subset, so by establishing a clean baseline. So phase 2, launch with governance. Set logging, exception queues, approval thresholds, and KPIs. Align the legal compliance on scope and policy library. Publish the rules of the road. So staff know that the agent doesn't, and the do's and don'ts. Phase 3, publish facts, not fanfare. So every 2 weeks, show a simple scoreboard, pre-claim saves, first pass denial delta, hours recovered, days in AR impact, celebrate the human plus agent wins. So agents fetch, say, 112 attachments. Team resolves, say, 38 exceptions. First pass denials down 9% in a cohort. So phase 4, add and next upstream control. So if doc capture was working, add EVB. If EVB stabilizes, add prior authorization orchestration. Then layer the pre-claim denial prevention as a final gate. Each addition reduces the failure rate in the next step. So phase 5 then would embed analytics into the ops. So make denial make a denial heat map. So top 5 pre-claim fixes. If the prior authorization bottlenecks by payer, a standard agenda item in a monthly ops and clinical documentation huddles. So use what you learn to nudge templates and coaching the micro policies. And then phase 6, we have a couple more phases, promise. So we have 7. So we're on phase 6, consolidate into patterns. So you notice the repeating of the same action, verify, attach, initiate, monitor, update, escalate. Create reusable agent patterns and share the policy library. That's how you scale without chaos. And phase 7, explain service lines and payers with discipline. So So resist the urge to turn it on everywhere. That's hard to do sometimes. March outward in rings of confidence, keeping your oversight cadence. This sequence is boring in the best way. So it reduces risk, builds trust, and compounds ROI. So when it feels that it's repeatable, then you're ready to paint the target and state the picture. Next slide, please.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to take a minute just to talk about what does this look like for our future vision. What does this look like at maturity? So this will be the last slide and we'll move to Q&A just because of time.
Yeah.
But at the front door, it's going to be eligibility checks, fire at scheduling. There's discrepancies or reconcile before resources are used. Prior auth requests initiate with complete data and are monitored without any portal chasing. Just imagine that. Document capture routes every inbound artifact to the right place with the right labels. Patient access teams stop hunting and start validating and coaching. So then you have where a denial prevention agent then takes over and acts like a firm but fair bouncer, if you will. And believe it, I used to be a bouncer back in the day, so I can relate to that. But if something's missing, then it gets it. If something's wrong, it corrects it or escalates it. If everything's clean, it logs ready. Risk scoring shifts hours from a fix later to a finish now. And then next, the denials don't just vanish, but they reduce in volume and they become more predictable. Appeals are rare and then faster because the missing stuff category is shrunk. So there's days in AR that are stabilized, variances narrows, and then the forecast gets more accurate. And then there's that leadership visibility. We're going back to that dashboard. They aren't just vanity metrics because everyone likes to look at, hey, what they're doing well, but they're steering the wheels. So which 5 pre-claim fixes prevented the most denials this month? Which service line is trending risk up and why? Which payer edit changed and how do we respond within a week? So that's clear transparency and actually what's happening and how you can affect change. And then the analysts graduate from a chase work to pattern work, turning rules, coaching units, and engaging clinicians. So coordinators spend less time in portals and then more time solving those edge cases. And then clinicians see fewer after the fact queries. And we all love querying physicians, right? And then we get clear guidance before the encounters even happen. So why it sticks? Well, it's because it's not a heroics model. It's a system, a standard work done the same way every time with humans applying judgment where it matters. That system makes staff lives saner and leaders' decisions very sharper. So to close, we're going to have another slide here, but I think we're going to skip it because this slide is really just kind of the key takeaways, what we've already discussed. So I do follow that adage of, hey, let's tell them what we already told them. But for now, we're just going to skip right to Q&A because we are at the top of the hour. And maybe we have some time to have some questions. And if there are any questions, please, put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A and we'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Stuart and Ramona, for providing us with valuable information. So yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat. And I also just want to thank Stuart and Ramona again, and also Infinx for being with us today and your support as our chapter's platinum sponsor.
Yeah,
See
happy
you in
to.
November. I'll see you in November. Yeah.
So I don't see any questions. But I also want to thank all the attendees for taking time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. We appreciate everyone being here, and we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars.
Awesome.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
all of you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.